Welcome to the Oxford Clay Pottery Podcast. I'm Catherine Tomlinson and I started an eco conscious pottery company called Oxford Clay. Now, Oxford Clay, I don't just make pottery, I also make books and courses for other potters who want to be more environmentally friendly in their pottery making. And that's what this podcast is all about. And I can't wait to get started. Let's go. Hello, welcome back to the Oxford Clay Pottery Podcast. I'm your host, Catherine Tomlinson, and it's so nice to be back here with you. Thanks for joining me on today's episode. So, in today's episode, we're going to be talking about some little imperfections that can happen in your pottery, usually after you've fired it. So, these can be some of them kind of occurring at like the after it's been bisque fired and um, some of them kind of like manifest after the glaze firing, and they are like super annoying in your pottery because you might think like, oh, that means my pottery's ruined, or like I have to throw it away or something. And that is absolutely not the case. So I thought I would like, yeah, just do an episode and tell you about some things that regularly happen in my pottery, regular imperfections that happen a lot, and like what I do about them, and just so you can see like it's not like you don't have to like get rid of that pot if this thing happens. So um from an environmental point of view, I thought this would be like a really good episode to do because um like when clay's fired, like after it's been bisque fired or up to the glaze firing, um, that clay is like the molecular structure of it has changed. And so it means that like, we can't change that clay like back into wet clay. And so effectively, you've got this thing, you don't really want to be like throwing away the thing that you've made, especially as well, like you've put so much hard work into that thing. You don't, your pot, you don't want to like be, having to like get rid of it just because, there's something that weird that happened with the glaze or the other things we'll talk about. So yes, I thought like there are loads of things you can do to some really common things that happen, and it doesn't mean you have to throw away your pottery. So let's get started. I'm just checking I got all my pots with imperfections around me. So yeah, they're all here. Um, Okay, so let's talk about something that happens quite often when you've like after you've bisque fired a pot. So I throw mugs on the wheel, and this like I'm going to show you a mug that I've thrown on the wheel. It's basically just like a cylinder mug, very simple shape, and I basically I pull the handle, hand pull the handle, and the clay that I was using for this particular mug that I'm just holding up. It's basically just it's quite a big mug. It's like the perfect size for a cup of tea, like, a nice big cup of tea. We want like a nice tea break. And so, this mug, when I was making it, I was like, oh, it's a perfect size. It's like I spent ages kind of shaping the handle, making the handle like, because, it's exactly the right like shape and stuff, like, for my hand and stuff. And this particular mug was made out of scraps from like slip casting clay basically. So I sort of collect all those up and I just like reclaim them. And it's not the best clay for kind of pulling handles. There's some clays are like they just work so much easier for like pulling handles, and this was like I don't know how to describe it, but basically they would quite often sort of break. It was quite hard to kind of stretch the handle without kind of putting too much stress on the clay, and then like kind of cracks would appear and stuff like that. So yeah, I did a few attempts and then I attached this handle because it was cracking when I was sort of bending it, so I was like bending it in shape and then letting it dry in its shape and stuff, and then attaching it then. And anyway, thought I got it right, thought it was all fine. No cracks appeared, when it was drying, it was all good. And then like at the bisque, after I opened the bisque kiln, I noticed that there were like hairline cracks where the handle was like joining onto the side of the mug. Annoying. It's like, no, they'd spent so long doing it. It was the perfect shape. The handle had taken me so many attempts. And so, yeah, this was something I was like, oh, and I, in one of my classes once, a pottery teacher basically said to me that, when you're glazing stuff, it's kind of adding strength to the pot. And so what I did with this pot is I glazed it like over the crack that had appeared, but like so basically I dipped the pot in glaze. So the ins well the so basically I Let me start that again. I basically poured glaze on the inside of the pot, and then I dipped the pot in glaze just around the rim. So I kind of poured a very sort of shallow dish of glaze because I really love that effect of like having some parts of the pot like unglazed. So basically, I just glazed the rim, but I made sure that that glaze went over the crack. Of like where the very top of the handle had cracked basically when it had joined onto the pot, and it wasn't like a very bad crack. I just want to stress this that it wasn't like the point where, it wasn't like the handle was actually kind of coming away from the pot. It was more just like a hairline crack had appeared, sort of indicating, I guess, that like, potentially, like, yeah, it's this. I want to get this across that it wasn't like it's not the handle was not going to fall off, but it kind of looked a bit like, I suppose, a cosmetic imperfection because you could see that crack. And obviously, this mug is for my own use. I'm taking this risk. I know it's going to have a hot liquid in, but I know that when I add glaze to, a mug like and it's glazing over that crack, it's adding a huge amount of strength to that pot, like that kind of join. So yeah, I was happy with that. So basically, you can kind of like, I'm not gonna say like cover up, but basically, if you get hairline cracks in, say, like for example, something that you've joined on, like this often happens to me actually when because I do a lot of sprigs. Like I've talked about this before in the podcast, but I use silicone molds from the cake decorating industry to do sprigs for like decorating pottery. So basically, I do like butterflies and dragonflies, like really lovely, like intricate kind of clay shapes that you can make. And quite often there'll be a crack where the sprig hasn't like fully attached onto the pot, and that's just because they might be slightly different drynesses. They you always have this like, is it going to crack off, the kind of problem in pottery like so much. And when you glaze, so when I glaze over the kind of the sprig that's attached to the pot, any little tiny crack that might be between the pot and the sprig, that say like, that sprig is attached, that design is attached onto the pot, but there might be a teeny weeny little crack that's just appearing around the edge, just why it appeared when it's drying, or at the comes out really at the bisque after the bisque fire. um During the bisque fire. And then that can be glazed over, and then it's effectively, you're kind of filling that crack. So yeah, so that's the first thing to say. Small cracks, say like where you've attached something, you can glaze over that, and it's going to add strength. And if you're using, I don't know, maybe you're using an opaque glaze or a more opaque glaze, then you're probably not going to see that crack anymore. So for example, the mug that I was talking to you about, that glaze is just like an ash glaze, and it's the particular ash. It was a hardwood ash, but sometimes that can go quite opaque, which is fantastic. So yeah, the recipe for that is just like 40 parts ash, 40 parts Cornish stone, and then 20 parts quartz. And yeah, that make it made a kind of quite an opaque glaze that's actually, you can't see any kind of sign of a crack there at all on the top. So yeah, so that's the first thing to say. If you have like a tiny crack in your pottery, where you've attached something on, that's not a massive disaster. You can add strength. You could come out of a bisque kiln and you're like, oh, do I have to throw the whole thing away? No, you don't have to throw it away. You can glaze it, and it's going to be fine. Okay, so yeah, just the caveat to that is if it's like, an obvious kind of major structural problem to your pottery, and like, that's going to result in like, some kind of high risk situation with you and a hot liquid, then like you can kind of like, rethink it. But if it's just like a hairline crack, it's more like a cosmetic thing, then you can absolutely still like salvage that pot, and glaze is so useful in that situation. Okay, so that's the first imperfection that you might get. I'm just interrupting this episode to tell you about a totally free guide I've made just for you on how to make a stoneware pottery glaze. So, if you've never made a glaze before, or if you make loads of glazes and you just want a recipe, this guide is for you. It tells you everything you need to know, and it's available via the link in the show notes. Let's get on with the episode. The second imperfection, which is something I get a lot in my pottery, is that the glaze might be rough. So I get this all the time because I use ash glazing in my pottery, an ash glaze in my pottery from the recipe I just said actually. And quite often where that's quite thin on the pot, so quite often it'll be like, say for example, the edges of a handle, or it'll be maybe like the rim of a pot, the very rim. um it goes rough. So I'm just holding up a mug. You probably can't see the roughness of that, but basically it's like a beautiful, it's like a small mug that I make in a slip. It's like a slip cast mug, and I attach like a sprig design of a butterfly onto it, and then the very rim of this mug is they are quite often a little bit rough. And that is just the way it goes with an ash glaze sometimes, which is like it's not ideal. It's not ideal because you want to be like, drinking from that. That's exactly where you want to be drinking from. And you really want it to be like, just like nice on your mouth, really, when you're taking a sip of your like delicious coffee or something. So that is, unfortunate. And you might think, oh, like I have to throw them all. And it happens with quite a lot of them. And that's just because this particular design is very thin. And so, it sometimes the glaze just isn't thick enough. It's basically like the clay hasn't been able, the bisque fired clay hasn't been able to like get enough of that glaze, like absorb enough of that. Like it's kind of become saturated basically with the water in the glaze, and it means that just the glaze is a bit thin basically on that part. Um, but what you can do with this is you can literally just use sandpaper. So I use well, this piece is like 180. Don't know what like roughness. Don't know what the measurement is, but on the back it's 180. It's in terms of fineness of sandpaper, and this is like a really super fine sandpaper, and I can basically just sand down the rim of the pot, and it makes it like super smooth. And the yeah, I guess ideally you would want like that to be glossy and stuff, like a glossy glazed area, um but I don't want to, get like to get rid of all these pots, and that's the kind of intrinsic part of the design is that they're quite delicate and thin. Um, so sanding back is absolutely fine because this clay is like vitrified; it's fully vitrified. So underneath if I just sand off that kind of rough surface, it's going to be absolutely fine. It's going to be like a beautiful, smooth kind of clay. There'll be a bit of glaze still on there, so it's just going to make the surface like a lot nicer for someone to like drink from, basically. So, yeah, so if you've got rough patches in your on your pottery, you don't normally, to be honest, you don't normally get this in sort of with glazes that aren't like ash glazes. I haven't seen it like too much in all the kind of glazes I've tested like over the years in terms of like normal base recipe glazes, which are kind of rocks and say some clays and stuff in the recipe. You don't normally get that. It's either like a matte glaze or it'll be like a shiny glaze, and then like you're not going to get like patches where it's probably considered like a glaze imperfection, I suppose, but because it's just not been thick enough. So yeah, but this does happen to me with my ash glaze. So yeah, you can sand it back and it's absolutely fine. And you can just you can if you want to do it actually really quickly, you can just literally put this piece of sandpaper down on the flat surface like a table or something, and then you can just take the pot and then you can just twist the rim of the pot onto that piece of sandpaper, and it will kind of do it all at once. Or you can just do it um, by hand, just sand it by hand, and you'll get like a beautiful, like smooth surface. So yeah, don't throw that mug away if that happens to you. Just sand it a bit, and then you can still use it. Um, Okay, so that's the second imperfection you might have. And then, oh yes, this is a really common one, like it's number three as well, that often when you fire pottery in a kiln, you might get a tiny piece of the kiln shelf like sticking to the base of the pot. Now, this isn't where like the glaze is dripped down and it's actually like broken the pot off, because I've seen that I've seen that quite a lot. Say like the glaze is like extra runny. Sometimes it's just hard to anticipate like how runny that glaze is going to be. It's stuck your pot to the kiln shelf, or perhaps it's shattered the pot off the kiln shelf as the kiln has cooled down. I'm not really talking about that kind of imperfection, but like, I'm talking about, like, you sometimes get because obviously you can salvage that pot as well, but those kind of problems with your pot are gonna be probably it's gonna probably take quite a big chunk out where it's, like, stuck to the kiln shelf. And just to say as well, just be so careful with, where bits where the glazes run down the shelf and then say a pot has broken off or something, that 'cause they can be absolutely razor sharp. Like, I've cut myself a couple of times on, just pieces of glaze basically on kiln shelves. Like if you're going to chip that off as well to kind of salvage your kiln shelf, just make sure you're wearing like goggles and Yeah, it can be, like, super, super dangerous because 'cause they're like shards of glass, basically. So, like, but what I'm talking about in this bit is just, like, where you get, like, little tiny, tiny pieces of the kiln shelf, and that's just because, say, you've got, like, backwash on the kiln shelf or something, and, you just quite often just get, like, a little bit of the kiln shelf, like a teeny weeny bit, teeny weeny speck, um, like, stuck to your pot. I don't know whether you can see I don't think you can see that, but basically, it's like a tiny little speck of white, basically. That's how I know it's, "Oh, that's a bit of a kiln shelf." Like, I'm talking about, like, a tiny maybe if you took, like, 6 grains of sand, put them all together, that's the kind of area I'm talking about, just a teeny tiny, tiny, sorry, you can't see on the video at all, but basically, it's just like a tiny, tiny bit of kiln shelf stuck there. The problem with this is it can make it rough on the base of your pot, and, obviously, like, then if you're putting it down, like, say, like your beautiful polished wood kind of, I don't know, like dresser or something, you don't want that little tiny piece of rough kiln shelf like scratching your furniture and stuff like that. So again, the way you deal with this is you're just sanding it off with a piece of sandpaper, and ideally, fine sandpaper is really good because then it will just create that like beautiful fine surface on your pot. Um, just like with before, where you got a rough rim of the pot, from the glaze being too thin, you can do exactly the same thing. You can literally put the piece of sandpaper just on a flat surface, and you can just like twist the base of your pot, like to get that piece of kiln shelf off, and it'll be like super super smooth on the base, and then it'll be perfect. So you can do it like that, or you can literally just like again just take a piece of sandpaper, literally just literally just sand it, and it will come off. Oh, that one's actually just come off. Just in that tiny bit of sanding I did. So that's so good. So, right, so that's the third imperfection. Okay, and then the fourth imperfection, which is quite a common one as well, and well, with certainly with the glaze I use, is that I quite often get like little bubbles of glaze, and this is probably again considered like glaze imperfection. Like I've got a particular vase which is like kind of it's like a little kind of bud vase that I make, and for some reason it quite often just gets like bubbles of glaze on it, and oh, there's a little bubble again. Like these can be rough, so again you can't really see that on the video, but basically there it's like a little bubble of glaze, and it feels rough because what's happened is that bubble has kind of burst to the point where then it's created a kind of sharp edges, like kind of thing, like sharp, because like the bubbles burst and it's left this kind of shards shards of bubble. And I know actually I did read this in a book once about how to stop this, and it was saying you can let it, it could be if some organic matter or something is burning out of the clay, and you can, and it creates a sort of kind of gas sort of situation where like then it's trying to get out of the pot, as the glaze is there, and you can do things like you can soak it more in the kiln, to kind of let the bubbles come out, and then it cools down and stuff like that. But mine isn't like troublesome. What I basically do is I just again take trusty piece of sandpaper, and then I just actually just sand the sharp bits off that bubble. And if you're using like a kind of coloured sandpaper, like this one, green, then you do sort of get like a green shade. Do you kind of get a green dust sometimes? The green dust kind of comes off and then it gets in the bubble. So you might need to kind of just give it a little wipe with a cloth or something like that. But you can effectively get rid of bubbles, smooth them out. I mean, you're going to still see that there was a kind of little bubble there, but the really good thing is it's no longer like sharp, and so it won't like it's kind of like safe basically. So yeah, so that's something you can do if you have a little bubble, a few little bubbles on your glaze. So those are all kind of glaze firing imperfections. You don't have to throw your pot away or vase, your beautiful vase. You can just like sand them down. It's safe to touch. It's safe to like, be holding your vase. It's not going to like cut you and stuff. So, those sharp glassy edges. So those are four really, really common things that can happen in your pottery. I forgot to say at the beginning, which I was going to open with this, but like, just to say, there is no such thing as kind of like, imperfect pottery, even though even this whole episode has been about imperfections in your pottery. It's more about like the pottery is always going to have like the mark of the maker, and that is intrinsically like beautiful to the pottery. And also, pottery is like, I mean, it's such a mysterious process. You can do everything exactly the same, again as you did before, and you'll get like a different result. We just don't know what's happening in that, mysterious kiln process, or the mysterious drying process, or the firing, yeah, the glaze firing, the bisque firing, like what's happening in there. And why does it work sometimes and then other times, you feel like you're doing, oh, you feel like you've even progressed your skills, whatever progressing means. But you're like, I don't know why this is happening right now. Like, why are these glaze imperfections happening and stuff? But like, it's all is not lost. You do not have to, like, get rid of the whole thing. You can just, you fix these little things. Pottery is not meant to be perfect. It's meant to be organic, beautiful, have this kind of mysterious process of creating pottery and making pottery kind of embodied in it. So, yeah, so I just wanted to say that. And thank you so much for joining me on this episode. Yeah, it's been so nice talking to you about like minor imperfections in pottery, and loads of the things you can do about it. And you don't have to bin your favorite mug that you spent ages on. You can just give it a little sand. It's good as new. Or put a little bit of glaze on that like tiny crack that's appeared, and it's all good. So yeah, thank you so much for joining me, and wishing you very happy potting until the next episode, and looking forward to seeing you then. Goodbye. Thank you so much for joining me on that episode. And if you want to find out more about eco-friendly pottery, head over to the Oxford Clay website, which is www.oxfordclay.co.uk. Can't wait to see you there.